should you pray for your future husband or your future wife? Now this is a concept you've probably come across and heard of, but the idea of this is to be praying for your future husband, whoever that may be. So this is maybe before you're even dating. Back, I know some people do it from childhood. They're praying about their future husband, praying for their future husband, praying about their character, about their life. People do it in kind of different ways, but the overall kind of concept is just that you're praying for this future husband. You don't necessarily know who they are at this stage, but you're praying for them. And today I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive on, should you do this? Is this a good idea? What kind of things do we need to think about if we are going to do this? But before I get started, let me know down in the comments, did you pray for your future husband, your future wife? Or is it maybe something that you're doing right now? Let me know down in the comments, I'd love to hear. Now, my personal experience is that I have now been married for 5 years, and this is not something that I did. I did not pray for my future husband before I met him, before I knew him. And to be honest, this wasn't really a concept that I had heard about until I was an adult. But I also wasn't particularly focused on or thinking about marriage when I was a child. I didn't kind of dream about my dream wedding. I wasn't kind of thinking about my husband and about having kids at a young age, which I know some people do dream of that from a young age and think about it a lot. That just personally wasn't something I thought about very much as a kid. I think I always kind of assumed it would happen at some point, but I wasn't really thinking about it very much in childhood. And to be honest, the church didn't seem to talk about it that much either, or at least the churches that I attended kind of at that time. From what I can remember, we didn't really talk about sex, about marriage, about kids, about family, those kind of things very much, at least not in kind of youth groups or when kids were present. That I remember, maybe they did talk about it and I just forgot about it all, but I don't remember very much of that. But as I said, I did get married. I ended up getting married at 20. I've now been married for 5 years, and I also now have a 1-year-old daughter. And I've kind of been thinking, is this something I would encourage her to do? Is it something I would discourage her from doing? And I've kind of been thinking, should I be praying for her future husband, her future family? Is that something I should be doing? Is it something I should be encouraging her to do? I don't know, which is why I wanted to kind of think about that and explore that in this video. So let's start with, is praying for your future husband okay? Is it allowed? And I think yes. I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with this concept. I just think sometimes maybe we need to be a bit careful and a bit thoughtful about how we do it. And we're going to come on to some kind of considerations about that, things that we need to think about a little bit later. But I have heard some very faithful Christians that have done this and that have really appreciated the fact that they did this and gained a lot from it. So clearly it does work for some people and is helpful for some people. And I don't think there is anything wrong or sinful about talking to God about your future spouse. So on the flip side, is not praying for your future spouse okay? And again, I think yes. I don't think this is something we are commanded to do in scripture. I don't think this is a rule we have to follow. I do just want to caveat that by saying if you have a fiance or are in a committed relationship where you kind of know who your future spouse is probably going to be, then yes, I would recommend you pray for that person and should be praying for them. And I think we should be seeking after God's advice through prayer about any relationships that we're in and about marriage if that's something that you're thinking about. So let's come on to some things that I think we should think about if we are going to pray for a future spouse. If this is something that we want to do, I think there are some considerations that we need to think about. The first thing to think about is, are you creating an unattainable tick list for your future spouse that they have to somehow fit into because that's what you prayed for? You think, because I prayed for this, that must be exactly what God is going to give me, therefore any future spouse must have exactly these list of qualities. Will you therefore be disappointed if your spouse doesn't match up with those exact things that you've prayed for? And by this, I'm not saying that you should have low standards at all. I think it's important that as Christians we have standards and we have expectations of what our future spouse should be and who they are and their relationship with God and their character. But are we adding in extra rules about their sense of humour or rules about their appearance and their height and the hobbies that they're interested in? Are we setting our expectations in a certain way and holding too tightly to our desires rather than listening to God? Are we adding in shallow rules that we're then going to be disappointed if God then doesn't provide, even if this person is a wonderful Christian and a great husband in every other way? we've created this list, so we think God has to stick to our list. I don't think that is a very healthy way of approaching it. Something else to think about is, are we telling God what we want rather than listening to God and listening to God's direction? I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing our desires before God, telling God what we want, what we think would be really great. But I also think we need to balance this with listening to God and listening to His direction, rather than thinking that we know best. The third thing to think about is your future husband becoming a bit of an idol or an obsession? Are you placing them above God? I've definitely seen this happen to some people where this seems to be all that they think about. The only thing they pray about is their future husband. This is just almost an all-consuming thing that is just in their brain all the time. And sometimes it almost seems like they're praying to their future husband rather than for their future husband. And again, that is just not a healthy way of looking at it. Point number 4 is that a future husband, a future spouse, isn't promised. God doesn't promise that we will be able to get married. Not everyone is called to marriage. That isn't God's plan for everyone. Are you assuming that God is going to provide you a husband just because you've prayed about it, just because you think that's what is going to happen? What if God calls you to singleness? Again, it's still okay to bring those desires before God and talk to God about the fact that you do want marriage, you do want family in that way. Talk to God about those things. But I think it's also healthy to remember that a future husband isn't something that God has promised to us. And point number 5 is this impacting your experience of singleness? Are you just waiting for marriage, thinking that your life will begin at marriage? What about this time before marriage? What about this time of singleness? How are you using that time to serve and to glorify God? Are you becoming bitter and angry about being single because you just want to get to that point of marriage? Are you actually focusing so much on marriage that you're missing the time that you're in right now? So, what is my recommendation? Now, these are just my personal thoughts on what I think we should be doing when it comes to praying for our future spouse. The first thing that I think we should be doing is focusing on praying for our own relationship with God, our own character, our own development, making sure that we are growing in faith so that if we do get married, we are the best spouse, the best wife, the best husband that we can be. The second thing I think we should be doing is seeking after God's wisdom throughout our dating, throughout our thinking about marriage. Actually really focus on God and focus on where He is directing you in those relationships. The third thing that we should be doing is that if it's God's will for us to get married, He should direct us to that person, and we should be praying for Him to direct us to the right person. Not necessarily the person that we think is right, but the person that God is telling us is the right person. Fourth thing that we should be doing is praying for all of our relationships, whether they're our dating relationships, friendships, family, all of our relationships in all aspects of our life, rather than focusing on one in particular, this kind of distant thing. Are you praying and investing in the relationships that you have around you right now? My fifth recommendation is that if you are praying for your future husband, I think we should really focus on praying for their character, rather than focusing on some of the more shallow things like their appearance and those kind of things. Actually really focus on their character. Pray for their relationship with God. Pray for their humility and trustworthiness and patience and faith and love and joy and those fruits of the Spirit. And finally, I think we should be chatting to God about all of this, talking about our desires, talking about our questions, talking about placing it into God's hands, listening for His direction. Just keeping that communication with God, rather than coming to God with a list of what we want in a future husband. Actually chatting to God about it, bringing our thoughts before Him, asking Him to shape our thoughts and shape our view and shape our path going forwards. And another thing we should be thinking about if we are praying for a future husband is that just because someone matches up with a tick list of things that we've prayed for doesn't mean they are a good person or the right person. Someone can seem perfect in so many ways and still not be right, still have things that we can't tell about them, have red flags that we're missing because we think, oh, this matches up so perfectly with what I've prayed for that this must be the right person. And actually we need to be much more discerning than that, much more thoughtful. Turn to God, ask for His direction, seek wisdom from other people, and really get to know this person as well, not just focus on this tick list that we've created. Now, I know that I don't know everything about this, I do not know it all at all, and I'd love to keep discussing this and learning from you guys, especially if you did pray for your future spouse, or you are currently praying for your future spouse. I'd love to hear about that in the comments. How do you do it? What challenges did you face? Did it help you? Or if you didn't do it like me, why not? Would you recommend it to other people, or why not? But I hope you found this video interesting and maybe gave you some things to think about. If you did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to see more videos from me and Arnold. And if you are preparing for marriage or you're newly married and you'd like to hear some of the top tips and things that I learnt in my first 3 years of marriage, do check out this video right here. And we will see you very soon for a new video. Bye!